excited when I talk about these things. Everybody wave to Augustine. He's waving to you. So as we said last night, Tim's been going at a breakneck pace, coming in a couple hundred years every hour. We're going to stop. We're going to slow down this middle hour and take a look at one significant figure during this period of time and talk about why he was so significant, the impact he had on his time, and the significance for today. And today we're looking at Augustine. Augustine was the great transitional figure from late antiquity. Late antiquity? Oh, you turned me down?
It was like there's a hum.
Okay.
We're good.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
All right. From late antiquity to the Middle Ages. He took us from one era to the other. And for 1,000 years at least, he was the most influential person in Western Christianity. In fact, you could argue he still is, because the reformers, Martin Luther, Calvin, they drew upon Augustinian theology as well. So you could say, outside of the Bible itself, nobody's had a greater impact on Western Christianity than Augustine. Time magazine admitted this. A couple years ago, they ran a story on him. They said for the 1,600 years since his conversion, he has continued to exert a major intellectual, spiritual, and cultural force in the West. Well, the place that began when you talk about Augustine is his book, Confessions. Now, this was the first real autobiography ever written. Now, other people in the ancient world have written about their lives before, told their stories, but never with the depth of insight and the personal sense that Augustine did. He has a real deep sense of psychology and understanding of himself that comes out in his book, The Confessions. He doesn't just tell about his life, it's a spiritual journey, a spiritual journal. He talks about his relationship with God. In fact, the book begins, it opens with a prayer, and then it has these famous lines. You made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until we find rest in you. This is a story of his journey and his struggle with God. He's telling how God pursued him all these years and finally won him over, and then his life since then. God is the organizing principle of his work. So it's an autobiography, but the you here is just as important as the I. And it's built around God because Augustine saw his very life as centered around God, coming from God. Well, let's skip over all this. Constantine, that Tim mentioned, he moved his capital from Rome to Constantinople. Rome to Constantinople here, and divided the Roman Empire into two halves, east and west. Augustine was born in 354 AD during the reign of Constantius II, the son of Constantine. And he was born in North Africa, down here, in a little place called Gas, North Africa. It's modern-day Algeria, on the north coast of Africa. His mother was Monica. She was a very devout Christian. She prayed for her son's faith every day. His father was patrician. He's a pagan. He was also a patrician. Man, he was like a minor noble. He had land, he had slaves, he had a bit of money, and he wanted nothing more than for his son to follow his footsteps and to be well-educated, well-cultured. He didn't care about his morality so much. He just wanted him to be an upstanding young citizen, maybe become a lawyer, make his dad proud. He wanted him to be cultured. So Augustine was sent to good schools. Now Augustine, in his Confessions, he talks about his childhood at school, and how he enjoyed playing much more than he enjoyed studying. Now I know none of you can relate to that, right? The teachers would have to beat him to get him to do his studies, because you could do that back in the early 4th century. And he said he hated studying math and Greek. Anybody in here hate studying math and Greek? Okay. If you ever study Greek, you know exactly what he means, right? Not to mention math. But there's one thing he did enjoy studying, the classics. He enjoyed poetry, and he enjoyed Virgil. Because what's Virgil writing about? Yeah, it's great legends and stories, it's history, it's myth, it's all this, it's romance and adventure. Oh, okay. Greek, math, now forget that stuff. I'm interested in the romance and the adventure. And that's really what caught his fancy. He says, I learned all these things gladly, and I took a sinful pleasure in them. And for this very reason, I was called a promising boy. I love those legends and those stories, the battles going on, and the women being won. And And they thought I was a good student. I was just loving these stories. And as he grew, he continued to push the boundaries a lot. He got in a lot of mischief, Augustine did. One of the most famous stories is he tells about how he snuck into a neighbor's garden to steal some pears. But he shows a lot of depth of insight here. This is not just a story from his childhood. This is kind of an organizing principle. There's a lot of depth going on here. Because he said, I didn't steal a pear because I was hungry. I had plenty to eat. I had plenty of money to buy food. I didn't steal the pears because they were particularly good pears. In fact, the pears in my father's orchard back home were better. So if he wasn't hungry and they weren't good pears, why did he steal them? Yeah. He said, because it was fun. He said, I took joy in the theft and in the sin. We're going to talk about Augustine's view of sin here in a little bit. But it was just the sense of adventure, the thrill of doing something wrong that he enjoyed doing. And as he grew, so did his experience with sin. Lord, how loathsome I was in your sight. Lust stormed confusedly within me, whirling my thoughtless youth over the precipices of desire. And so I wandered still further from you. And you left me to myself. The torrent of my fornications tossed and swelled and boiled and ran over. Here he's saying, God, you made us for you, but I turned to other things, and you left me to that. You let me run. Let me experience a far country. Well, Augustine's father died when he was 16, and he was sent off to the big city of Carthage to study. Not the small town of Thagaste, but now Carthage. It was the biggest city, the biggest port in the Western Mediterranean, part of the Roman Empire. It was cultured, it was sophisticated, it was worldly, it was everything that Augustine dreamed of. And here he sowed his wild oats. And he said, before I left, he said, my mother commanded me not to commit fornication, and especially that I should not defile any man's wife. But this seemed to me no better than women's counsel. It would be a shame for me to follow such advice. I ran headlong with such blindness that I was ashamed among my equals to be guilty of less impudence than they were. I, who heard them brag mightily of their naughtiness, and I took pleasure to do it, not for the pleasure of the act only, but for the praise of it also. So all my friends are doing bad things, but I didn't want to be left behind. You know, I want to have good stories too. And so he indulged all of his appetites. And at the age of 17, he took in a living girlfriend. They lived together for 13 years, and she bore him a son. And he says he loved her deeply. But they never got married. Partly because she was from a different social class, and marriage between social classes was heavily discouraged, if not forbidden at this point. And so they never got married. They lived together for 13 years. Concubines were perfectly acceptable in society at that point, so nobody had a problem with that, except for his mother. A year later, the concubine bore him a son, a Deodatus, which means a gift from God. Oddly enough, he writes much about it. He lived with her for 13 years. He loved her deeply. He writes often about his concubine. He never mentions her name all throughout his autobiography. Interesting. While in Carthage, Augustine threw himself into his studies. He studied Latin, and he studied math and music, and most of all, rhetoric. Now, rhetoric's not taught anymore, not by that name. What is rhetoric?
Thought processes.
Yeah, thought and speech. How to talk and convince people, right? So studying rhetoric back then was basically the equivalent of a law degree today. You become a lawyer. So you would learn rhetoric before you became a lawyer or a politician or somebody significant like that. And that's what you studied, rhetoric. And at the age of 19, he read Cicero, a great rhetorician from Rome. And Cicero, in one of his books, talked about the importance, if you're going to be good at rhetoric, good at persuading people, good at argumentation, you need to study philosophy. Oh, okay. And so from this point on, Augustine devotes himself to the study of the highest calling, he thought at that point, the pursuit of truth, philosophy. But his search for truth led him away from Christianity initially. He felt the Bible was too barbaric. The Bible? Too barbaric? What does he mean by that? What's he talking about?
Old Testament.
The Old Testament. Particularly what kind of things in the Old Testament? Sacrifices. What else?
Promised land. Wipe her around.
Yeah, taking over, genocide and all those wars and things. He said only simple people believe these kind of tales. Really, it's interesting to see somebody, from the 4th century, look at the Bible going, it's so barbaric and ancient, how can, and he said, I didn't believe that kind of stuff. Wow, but he was drawn to Manichaeism. The Manichaeism was built by a guy named Mani. He was a Persian prophet from Persia. And he claimed to be the great apostle of Jesus Christ. He claimed to be the ultimate and final revelation of God. Of course, don't they always say that, right? But it was really a heretical mix of Christianity and Gnosticism, which was very prevalent at the time. Now, Manichaeists were dualists. There were two worlds. There was a world of light and love and truth and mind and spirit. And then there's a world of darkness and evil and flesh. And these two worlds are constantly at war with each other. Think Star Wars, the dark side and the light side, right? They're constantly in battle with each other. There has to be a balance between these two. And the human person is a fragment of the divine light trapped within an evil body. The divine goodness of God trapped within an evil and corrupt body. And this resonated with Augustine. So you hear a little bit of Christianity kind of in there, right? You can see how you take some verses out of the Bible, maybe out of Paul, talking about the corrupt flesh, and how you can kind of maybe get that out of there a little bit. That's what he's trying to do here. And this resonated with Augustine because he felt this battle taking place within him. I want to be this kind of person, but there's this war taking place inside me. I'm always struggling with. 375, he returned to his hometown to Gas, North Africa. He was 21 years old and on top of the world. He was educated, he was sophisticated, he had a reputation as a brilliant rhetorician and orator. He had a concubine and a son. In all the world, there was nobody as promising as Augustine, and he knew it. He got home, and his mother found out he'd become a Manichae, and not a manatee, a Manichae. And she said, "You're not staying in this house." And he's like, "Okay, fine." And so he got a job being a tutor of a son of a very wealthy man in town. So he's living with this wealthy man, living the high life, tutoring his son, enjoying all the wealth can buy you. He learned to develop the taste for expensive things at this point in his life. But about this time, he had an experience that shook him up pretty badly. He had a boyhood friend. He's back in his hometown. He had a boyhood friend. He never names, but he says, "I loved him. He was sweeter than any other sweetness of life." This close relationship. This friend had taken ill and was dying. And as he was dying, and he was a Manichae, just like Augustine was. But as he was dying, they called in the priest to come baptize him as a Christian. And Augustine was shocked. My friend and I, we made fun of the church all the time. We grew up together making fun of those Christians. And now he's baptized as a Christian? What gives? And so the friend became a little bit better. He seemed to be doing better. So Augustine was kind of teasing him about this. You are so sick, you're out of your mind, and they baptized you as a Christian. His friend became very serious. No, this is not a laughing matter. That baptism was real. I really meant it. And Augustine was taken back by his change of attitude, particularly when his friend died a couple weeks later. There's nothing that makes you question what you believe like death, right? And this is what's happening to Augustine. He's confused. He's grief-stricken. The way he writes about it is very touching. If you lost a loved one, I think you'll relate to this. This darkness fell upon my heart. This darkness fell upon my heart, and wherever I looked, there was only death. My homeland became a torture. My father's house, pure melancholy. All the pleasure I had shared with him turned into hideous agony now that he was gone. My eyes sought for him everywhere, but he was not to be found. I hated all the familiar sights because he was not there. He's going to all these fun places we went to as kids, but my friend's not there anymore. No, the places that were fun are just now torture to me. And so he didn't want to spend any more time at the Gas. He thought, I need to get out of here. And so he returned to teach in Carthage, the big city. He returned as a master of rhetoric. And shortly after that, Augustine heard Faustus speak. Faustus was one of the great leaders of the Manichaean movement, a great thinker, and Augustine was very excited to hear this man speak. But when he heard him speak, he was very unimpressed. He thought his thinking was shallow, it wasn't deep. and his lifestyle was not matching the things that he was saying. He was very disappointed with this whole thing. So now he's questioning his Manichaean religious beliefs. He decided the next thing to do was to pursue his career. He wanted to go to Rome, become an orator like Cicero. There's no place to do that like Rome. Professorship in Rome, that's going to do wonders for your career. You may even make a Roman senator at some point. But his mother, Monica, begged him not to go. She knew that this would not be a good thing for him, a healthy move for him. So she's literally following him out the door, begging him not to go. But he's good at persuasion and at lying. And so he said, Mom, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going down to the shipyard to see a friend off. All right? I'm not going anywhere. He didn't go home. So she said, all right, all right. So she leaves. He grabs his concubine, his son, hops in a ship, off to Rome. She wakes up in the morning, Augustine is gone. In Rome, he is the rising star. He hobnobbed with influential people, made a name for himself. He appeared in all the Sunday morning TV news programs, getting his opinion about important things. But all was not well in Rome. The year is 383. Soon to be Dr. McNeese. He's almost finished his doctorate, graduates in December, right? Yeah. Lord willing. Okay. Yeah. So, and showing this map here, Rome is now being threatened. This is a little bit later on, but it's being threatened by the barbarians all around. And not only is it being threatened by the barbarians at the border, it's being defended by barbarians. They're now paying Germanic tribes to keep other Germanic tribes from crossing the Rhine, the Danube River. And so it's a difficult, tense time in Rome. There are also religious controversies taking place. Pagans and Christians. Rome is officially becoming officially Christian at this point. Tim mentioned Theodosius, 380, making Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. I was talking to my mom. My great-grandmother, her name was Theodosius, named after that great emperor. The emperor at this time, Valentinian, ordered the statue of the goddess Victory removed from the Roman Senate. There in the Senate, they've got a statue to Victory, the pagan god Victory. And because the Christian empire, we can't have that. So the statue's removed and the senators go nuts. Come on, the greatness of Rome is because the gods have blessed us for all these centuries. How can we ensure that Rome will continue without, yeah, sure, we're Christians, but let's play it safe, right? Let's still not take away the goddess of Victory. And so there was a lot of controversy about that. Well, the administrative seat was in Milan, close to there. And when an administrative position opened up, Augustine was recommended for the position. In 384, he became the master rhetoric for the imperial court. This is like being a legal advisor to the President of the United States, which right now I would not want to be, but he had reached the seat of power, the heights of Roman power and authority. This is where he wanted to be. But God sought him out even there. Because while he's in Milan, he goes to hear the greatest, most famous preacher of his time, Ambrose. Now, Ambrose is not a country bumpkin preacher. Ambrose is educated. He's a brilliant orator. He is well-read. Everybody likes and respects Ambrose. And these are all values, characteristics that are highly prized by Augustine. So he goes to hear the man preach. He's very impressed. Augustine's about 30 at this point. Ambrose is 44. And he says, he received me as a father would, and as a good bishop should. He takes him under his wing. And Ambrose starts to answer all of Augustine's objections, all these questions he'd had about Christianity all these years, all these problems with the stories of the Old Testament. Ambrose very calmly explains them to him, helps him see these things in a new way, tears down his defenses. And Augustine made quite a life for himself at Milan. He invites his boy friends up there to live with him in the big house. He has his concubine and his son. He eventually invites his mother, Monica, to come and live with them. When Monica gets there, she decides it's time for the concubine to go. It was fine for one period of her life, but she convinces Augustine that she's going to hold you back from rising up the social ladder. And so she very generously arranges for him to marry a young Christian woman who's, is of a high social status. That'd be good for him, right? Of course, what's she thinking? What's her concern? Yeah, she's a Christian, right? Yeah. So that's going to work right here. So he surprisingly, he agrees to all this. He gets rid of the concubine. He weeps over this. He says, my heart was stuck to hers in the place where they were torn apart. It bled just because I was so much in love with her. But, he's looking for his career. And so he keeps the son, Adeodatus, and stays with them. The concubine leaves. Well, one day, oh, by the way, and it was about this time when he prayed the famous prayer, Lord, give me chastity, but not yet. What does he mean by that? Why did he say that? Yeah, I'm not ready to give this. He says, for I was afraid you would answer my prayer right away and cure me of the disease of lust. I didn't want to be cured. I wanted to be satisfied. So, Lord, give me chastity. Just not right now. One day, Augustine and his friend Alypius, they're at a house there, and they receive a friend who comes to visit. His name is Pontianus. He is a fellow African, like Augustine, and he's a member of the imperial court, the imperial secret service. And while he's there, Pontianus, he's talking to them, and he sees a copy of St. Paul's epistles lying there on the desk. And so he picks it up and starts casually talking about his own conversion to Christianity. Wow. I didn't know you were a Christian. Oh yeah, he talks about this. He talks about a couple of friends of his. Well, St. Anthony, back up a little bit. St. Anthony, we talked about one of the first monks. He wasn't the first, but one of the most famous. In the 300s, he goes into a church and hears the words read from the gospel, go and sell all you have and give it to the poor. And so, not knowing any better, he obeys the gospel. He sells everything he has, he gives it to the poor, and he goes out to the desert and becomes a monk. And opens a monastery. People follow him there. And so, Patricianus is telling a story. He says, two friends of mine, they happened along the story. They were by the side of the road. There was a book and telling the story of St. Anthony. And they picked it up and read it. And they decided to become Christians too. They gave up everything they had and they became monks. They were engaged to be married, but they broke off the engagement and gave everything away and went to become monks. And the two women they were engaged to, they didn't have convents yet, but they took vows of chastity, perpetual virginity as well. And then Patricianus, he gets up and he leaves after a while. And Augustine is just torn apart at this point. He's struggling with his own sin. Here he was, educated and intelligent and sophisticated and worldly, but he can't conquer his own lust and his own pride. While these others are willing to give up everything to follow Jesus. And after Pontianus left, he turns to his friend Alypius and says, Alypius, what's wrong with us? Simple men take heaven by force, but we, heartless and learned, see how we wallow in flesh and in blood. And he ran out of the house into the garden. He's weeping. I mean, he's just tormented by the struggle that's inside him. And while he's out there weeping, he hears a child's voice. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, he said. A young child's voice that says, Tole, lege, kind of a sing-song voice. And he said, I tried to think of a game, a child's game that would require the kids to say something like this, but I couldn't think of it. By the way, Tole lege means pick it up and read. So you hear his voice say, pick it up and read, pick it up and read. And I couldn't think of why somebody would be saying that, so he took that as an angelic voice. So he runs back in the house, he grabs the copy of Paul's epistles, and he reads right there, the spot that's lying right in front of him. Here's where he reads. Romans 13, 13 and 14. Let us live honorably as in the day, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in debauchery and licentiousness, not in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provisions for the flesh to gratify its desires. And he said, in an instant, as I came to the end of the sentence, it was as though the light of faith just flooded through my heart and all the darkness of doubt was dispelled. Everything changed. So now he says this in Confessions. Late have I loved you, beauty so ancient and so new. Late have I loved you. You were within, but I was without, seeking you there. You were with me, but I was not with you. These other things, they held me back from you. These things which would have no being, were they not for you? You called and shouted and broke through my deafness. You flared and blazed and banished my blindness. You lavished your fragrance. I gasped, and now I pant for you. I tasted you, and now I hunger and thirst for you. You touched me, and now I burn for your peace. Everything had changed for him. All this longing that he had, this thing he was searching for, he found it, and he found it all in God. And he went in and told his mother, and she was, of course, overjoyed. He was no longer interested in climbing the social ladder. All the stuff he'd been pursuing, it was meaningless now. Broke off the engagement, resigned his professorship. He spent the next several months studying scripture and philosophy, and then on the Saturday before Easter, the evening before Easter morning, he was baptized by Ambrose. Augustine, his friend Alypius, his son Deodatus, they were all baptized the day before Easter. And Augustine decided there was nothing for him in Rome anymore, so he decided to move back to North Africa, maybe open a monastery, he's not sure. On the way back, however, his mother, Monica, died. And very touching the way he writes about it. He's talking to her, and death is coming upon her. She says, "Son, look, my prayers have been answered. I've seen everything I want to see happen." Her husband became a Christian right before he died. Her son had become, this great Christian. She says, "I can die in peace." And so he closed her eyes and he prayed, read scripture over her as she died there. Later on, Monica was sainted by the Catholic Church, Saint Monica. The only woman named a saint simply because of her prayers for her son. That's the only reason. But she gave us this great church father in Augustine. And Saint Monica, Santa Monica, is named after her, this woman. He says in here, he writes about her so lovingly because he says, "I want generations after generations, all people who read this work to know the great saint that Monica was." Here we are, 1,500 years later, talking about Saint Monica. Moved back to North Africa, and soon after that, his son Deodatus died. 391, he goes to visit the church in Hippo, North Africa. And when the bishop Valerius saw Augustine come in the audience, he very shrewdly puts away his sermon notes and decides instead to preach about the importance. We need good priests here. The church needs good, educated priests who can, and so he's going on and on about this, talking about the importance of good priests. And he finally says, "Who is there here that would become a priest in God's church?" And he looks around and there's Augustine. And they grab him and take him to the front. And he's like, no, I'm not ready for this. I'm not. You are. And they demanded he become a priest, almost against his will. And he assented and said, "Okay, this is what the church wants. This is what I'll do." He's hearing this as a voice from God calling him. And so he becomes a priest there. He becomes a bishop at the church a few years later, at the church of Hippo, which is why he's known now as Augustine of Hippo, because that's where he was a bishop of the church. And as soon after this, he wrote his book, Confessions. Now, he's only about 45 at the time that he writes this. And he could have allowed the church to remember him as the great orator and writer and bishop and church father. But he knows there's a truth deeper than this. He doesn't want the humanity of the story to be lost. And so he writes his book, The Confessions. I love to read this part for you. He says, "I write this not just for my own soul, but for other people to read as well. I want people to know the struggles I've had." Because he's pretty sure that's going to relate to you too. That you struggle with sin and hearing the call of God. He wants people to know, I'm not perfect. That I've struggled all my life. And it's this great act of humility on his part that really cements his place in history. It's one of the most widely read books of all time. It is surely one of the great Christian classics and one of the most widely read books of all time. Okay, so my last 90 minutes, I'd like to shift to his theology. We've talked about his life a little bit, but it's really his teachings that's had such an impact on the church. And now, this is hard to summarize. He wrote over 1,000 works, over 250 books. A deep thinker, wrote about many topics. So summarizing his theology is a little bit dangerous here, I understand that. But I want you to understand some of the things that he talked about and why they were so significant. And like many of us, his theology was formed in the heat of controversy. Somebody's teaching this, and so he kind of reacts to it to set them straight. And that's kind of how a lot of us do our theology sometimes. Well, let's start with something simple. Let's start with the problem of evil. We can cover that in a minute or two, right? Students struggle with this. You know, they come, they talk about, if God is good, and He created a world that's good, and everything in the world is good, why is there so much evil in the world, right? Well, Satan, we like to say, it's Satan's fault. Well, who created Satan? Well, God created Satan, but He created him good, and Satan chose to be evil. Well, didn't God know that would happen? If God's so brilliant, why didn't He know this would... And so, the more you think about this, the deeper it gets pretty quick, and it's really a struggle for some people. Now remember, Augustine was a follower of Manichaeism, which said there's the two great worlds, the good and the mind and the spirit, and the world of the flesh, and evil and darkness. Well, in contrast to this, Augustine said evil is not something. It's not a power. It's not a substance. It is a corruption of that which is good. Like darkness. Darkness is not a thing. Light is a thing. Darkness is just the absence of light. Right? You can't take a piece of dark and put it in a room. I'm going to light some dark here. You can't do that. Darkness is a corruption or an absence of that which is good. You get a hole in your shirt. Well, the hole is not a thing. It's not an object. It's a corruption of this shirt. The eye, you lose your eyesight. Well, the blindness is not a thing. It's that which is good is not working well. See where he's going with this? So he says everything is evil. It's not a thing. It's not a power. It is an absence or corruption of that which is good. Now, if you've read C.S. Lewis lately, Mere Christianity, he takes the same thing. That there's nobody's evil just to be evil. You know, snidely whiplash coming. Nobody does that, right? He says people are evil out of desire, out of a love for something. I like to throw that out to my students. You know, do you believe that? Most of them do. Well, why would somebody rob a bank? They love money, right? Or maybe they even love somebody that they want to help out. They need the money to help out somebody. Why would somebody become an alcoholic? Do what? Okay. So what do they love in that case? What's their love? Relief. Okay. I love the relief that comes with alcohol, the numbing that comes with alcohol. Why would somebody eat too much? I say it right before lunch. Because I love food, right? Why would somebody lie? They love themselves. They want people to think well of them, right? I like you, and I want you to think well of me, you know? So I may lie about some things. And so he says, we want wealth, we want power, we want success, whatever it is that we love, and then we do what we have to do to get those things. He says, that's evil. Quotes John here. John calls this lust of the flesh and lust of the eyes and the pride of life. Okay. You love things, you just love the wrong thing. And so for Augustine, evil, the heart of evil is loving the wrong thing. Or as he puts it, getting your loves out of order. It's fine to love your job, but if you love your job more than you love Jesus or God, there's a problem. It's fine to love your family, but if you love your family more than you love God, that's a problem. It's good for you to love any number of things, people. But if you love people more than you love God, you got your loves out of order. That's going to cause problems in your life. And this is very profound. I think it's one of his great contributions that he says sin is not just breaking the rules. That's a shallow view of sin. Sin is just the will being oriented to the wrong thing. Instead of being oriented first and foremost to God, it's oriented towards other things. That's a deep view of sin. So for Augustine, a person can be a very decent person on the outside, doing all kinds of good things, giving their money to all kinds of good causes, and helping out in all kinds of important things. But if their love is in the wrong place, I want you to think well of me. He said, that's sin. Didn't Jesus say something kind of like that? Right? You stand in the street corners and pray, you give your money to be seen by men. He said, you got your reward. Don't expect God to see. Augustine's picking up on that. All right. So because he has this deep view of sin, that sin is not just doing wrong things. Sin is a fundamental orientation of the will away from God. So he says this is something that's part of human nature. It's not making a mistake. It's not choosing the wrong bad action. It's a view of human nature that's here since birth. And so it takes in the idea of original sin. Now, Pelagius was a monk in the 4th century who rejected this idea of original sin. He believed that a person's tendency to sin is by their own free choice and will, and that you could be perfect if you chose to. If you wanted to, you could be perfect and not sin. Yeah, what do you think of that? Yeah. You do it and then come tell me how that worked, right? And Augustine said, following this line of logic, there's no need for grace. It's just a matter of willpower. If you can be perfect without God's divine grace, just by your own willpower, then you could, And so he said that goes against what the gospel teaches. He believed that human beings are incapable of doing good without the help and assistance of God. So the idea of original sin didn't begin with Augustine, but it was a central part of his theology. It drove much of what he talked about. Mr. Lawrence.
Did he believe that guilt was passed on to progeny?
Great question. With this idea of original sin, how much of that Adam's sin carries on? Originally, it seems like, and he changed over his many decades of writing. Originally, it was more just a propensity towards sin. That's part of this fallen human condition. But later on, in contrast to Pelagius, and this is where I say his theology was formed in controversy with somebody else. Pelagius' argument against original sin, and so he pushes the idea further and we find him saying, yeah, even guilt comes from Adam. Because, let's talk about DNA tests. Right? You take a biblical DNA test, and all of us have the same, they'll go back to Adam, right? And he says, so we were all part of him when he sinned. We come from a sinful person, and we all inherit that guilt from sin. So yeah, I think we want to disagree with Augustine on that part. But you at least see why he says this, right? By the way, that's why infant baptism becomes so important to Augustine. This is why in the Catholic Church, then, it becomes an important sacrament. Because if we're born into sin, if we're born guilty, the only thing that can remove that is baptism. He says, baptism washes away absolutely all of our sins, whether of deed or word or thought, whether sins original or sins added, whether knowingly or unknowingly contracted. So if baptism washes away our sin, and children are born into sin, it's important for them to be baptized. From this point on, infant baptism becomes an important part of the Catholic Church. But I want you to understand it. Augustine wasn't trying to corrupt the church for all time when he does this. And he's trying to do what we all do. Trying to take Scripture and make it make sense and apply it. Trying to figure out, given the information he had, what to do with that. Takes us to predestination. Since salvation is an act of God, not a human choice, that means God chooses whom he will save. And here, Augustine draws upon the biblical themes of election. Now this is, you study the Bible. Are there any verses that can support something like that? Romans? Absolutely. God chooses who he chooses and rejects who he rejects. And who are you to argue with that, right? Who is the clay to say to his master, why did you make me this way? Ephesians 1, he talks about predestination. Ephesians 2, by grace you've been saved through faith. Even this is not of yourself. It's a gift of God. The faith comes from God, not by works, lest anyone should boast. And so he's drawing upon these biblical themes in contrast to some other heretics and false teachers out there, and kind of pushes him to a far extreme position where he says God actually chooses whom will be saved. Now this is one of those things the Catholic Church didn't really pick up on much during the Middle Ages, but oddly enough, the Reformers, Luther, Calvin, will pick up on this theme because they knew Augustine very well. John Calvin said, Augustine is so completely of our persuasion that if I should have to make a written profession, it'd be simply enough to present a composition made up entirely of excerpts from his writing. Calvin read a lot of Augustine and said, yeah, this is why I believe what I do. And so from Calvinism then, we get this idea of predestination, which goes into Baptists today. But Augustine, although he believed in predestination, he also believed in free will. So God's predestination is not, he knows what you're going to have for lunch today. He knows what you're going to wear tomorrow. Not that kind of predestination. God has chosen you to be saved, but you could choose otherwise. You've got the free will to reject that. That Augustine even believed you could fall from grace and reject God's will and lose your salvation. Rubric. At the beginning of the 4th century, the Emperor Diocletian persecuted the church. Diocletian's persecution, 302, 303, was one of the worst the church experienced. This was a point in church history where Christians were taken in and said, say Caesar is Lord or you will be killed. You'll be thrown to the lions. And this was intense. People were having their property taken, family members arrested and killed. It was a tough time to be a Christian. And many people caved under the pressure. Take you into the Colosseum there. Take your spouse or your children and say, those lions look awful hungry to me. You can save your kid's life if you'll just make an offering to the god Zeus here. Say Caesar's Lord. You don't even have to mean it. Just say Caesar's Lord and you can go free. Isn't that tempting? And some people did. And the Donatists are people who said, oh, okay, if people did that, they caved under pressure. They can't be accepted back. You had your opportunity, you blew it, and especially as a church leadership position, you can't win that back. And so they said, we're the one true church. We're the pure, we're the righteous. If you're gonna be saved, you have to be baptized by a Donatist priest. If you're gonna be saved, you have to receive the Lord's Supper from a Donatist. Now Augustine said, no, it's not true. It can't be that way. You think about it for a second, you start to understand his logic. Because if your baptism, the validity of your baptism, depended upon the person who baptized you, what does that mean? What are the implications of that?
Never know for sure.
You don't. You don't, because you don't know what was going on in his whole life. Or let's say the guy who baptized me, he was a devout Christian, but the person who baptized him had sinned at one, or the person before him. In other words, to be sure of your salvation, you'd have to prove an unbroken line of people all the way back to the beginning. Augustine said, no, of course not. The validity of baptism is not based on the character of the person who baptized you. It's the promise of Jesus Christ in the obedience of the act itself that you are, grace is bestowed upon you. Not in the character of the person who's doing the baptism. Good call there. Finally, the city of God. 410, Alaric defeated, sacked Rome, 410 for the first time. Many Romans fled to the safety of North Africa, just across the Mediterranean there. And this shook the foundations of Western civilization, you can imagine. Some pagans blamed Christianity for the fall of the Roman Empire. Why? Yeah, you stopped worshiping all the gods. Why? Of course they're upset at you. Plus, a large number of Christians were pacifists. Well, of course we're going to be overrun by all kinds of barbarians. If you Christians would stand up and fight, it's all you pacifists who want to love your enemies and turn the other cheek. That's why Rome has fallen. And so Augustine found himself with a double task here. He's taking care of all these refugees who were coming into North Africa. And he's also having to deal with these anti-Christian charges taking place. And so he wrote the book, The City of God. Worked on it for 13 years. I'll admit, I have not read the whole thing through. A couple years ago, I mean, I've read parts of Confessions. A couple years ago, I decided to read it cover to cover. Just a delight to read. I highly recommend it. Towards the end, he gets the speculation about God and time and philosophy. But just a great book. City of God, 1,500 pages. Politics and philosophy. I figured, hey, if it took him 13 years to write it, I can take a while to read the whole thing, right? I'm not going to kill myself for nothing.
As to type of literature, what is the city of God? It's a defense. It's an apology in some sense. I mean, it's politics. But what he does, he walks through, there are two cities, the city of God, the city of man. The city of man is fallen. The city of God is those who seek the will of God. But right now, we coexist. These two cities are mingled together. Use the illustration of Jesus' parable of the dragnet catching a fish. You got some good fish, and you got some fish you're going to throw out. You got the field with some wheat and some tares in it. He said, right now we've got this blending of the city of God and the city of man, and these are all mixed together. And so what he does, he argues that Christians can fulfill the obligation of citizenship here in this world, including participation in warfare. So he's trying to argue now that Christians, God says don't kill. Yeah, but God also gives the state the authority to punish the wicked, to protect the innocent. And so if you, as a state figure, you're just acting on the authority that God has given the state to carry out its God-given duty. You're not killing somebody, you're fulfilling the will of God as the state does that. How do you feel about that? I mean, we kind of do the same thing, don't we? Talk about a police officer. He uses force, but that's legitimate force, isn't it? This is what Augustine is saying, and this gets into what we would call today just war theory. Yeah, you can go to war as a Christian, provided these certain criteria are met. It's legitimate authority. I'm sorry to say this, but you don't have the right to declare war on somebody. You can't say, okay, I'm now going to start a war. It has to be legitimate government authority that God has given authority to. It has to be for just cause. You can't just say, I don't like them. I want their land. No. You have to have a just cause. And now we've developed all kinds of criteria with just war theory, just ways of going about doing this. This all goes back to Augustine, who argued for 1,500 pages that you can do this legitimately as a Christian and fight a just war because God has given that authority to the state. And this is written at a time when Rome is falling apart. He starts writing it shortly after Rome is sacked. By the time he finishes writing, the Vandals are at the gate, literally. He's in Hippo, and along those refugees that come to Hippo to seek safety, they also bring with them disease. And so he's caring for all these people, and in the fall of 427, he is, 429, he gets a fever that he never recovers from. And he dies, literally, while the Vandals have the city of Hippo under siege. The Vandals come all the way down to North Africa, and they have the city under siege, and he dies there. And so when he talks about warfare, this is not abstract thought to him. This is the people of God trying to fight for their survival. So you've got to give him a little leeway for that. Not just theoretical abstract. So when he dies, 430, Augustine, and Hippo fell, and shortly after that, Rome fell for the final time, putting the end to Western Roman Empire and enters into the Middle Ages. He also wrote other important works on a Trinity. He talks a lot about trying to help us understand the nature of the God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. He wrote a book called Soliloquies. What's a soliloquy? Conversation with who? With yourself. Yeah, Hamlet has a soliloquy, right? Where he talks to himself. Well, guess where that came from? Augustine. He invented the word soliloquy. He calls the book Soliloquies, and he says, I'm sorry, I know it's not a word, but I needed a word to describe what I'm doing. Because the book is a description of his inner dialogue. He's having a discussion with reason, the voice of reason, which is an inner conversation. And this was, in the ancient world, this was unheard of. And so he is helping us, develop a whole new way of understanding himself and communication. So, with the death of Augustine at the end of the Middle Ages, the landscape looks completely different from here now. But he has set the theological stage for what's going to happen for the next 1,000 years, as Tim and Nisa are going to talk about here. Tim?